So the next step would be, let's go in and look at the history of inspections, or let's start doing some inspections. But before I jump into there, I would like to just take a look at some of the planning tools. So we're going to come back to this last button here, which is the inspection history. That'll show us all the computing scale inspections that have been done at this Safeway and let us do additional ones. But there's another way to look at these inspections due, right? So we've got a couple of inspections due in March and an inspection due in December. Actually, I put 21, but I meant to put 2020 in here. So let me just fix that. So we got one coming up in December and then a couple coming up in March. So we have our weights and measures planner and also a map viewer. I'm going to go to the planner first. So the purpose of the weights and measures planner is to show over some outlook time period, which is defaulted right now to 30 days, what are all the inspections that are due by that date? So I'm going to kick this out a year. And you'll see here we've got, the 3 that we just entered. So we got a package audit due December, we got petroleum inspection due March, and a computing scale inspection due March. So as far as, planning out my activity as a weights and measures inspector, first thing I want to do is I want to filter this list down because, once you have all your data in here, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of entries over the next, 6 months or a year or whatever. So I can start filtering down to just either the things that I'm responsible for or the things that I want to tackle in the next 30 days or whatever my window outlook is up here. So I could filter down to districts. I can say, okay, I only want to do things in this district. And you'll see as I make these selections up here, it's automatically updating my selections down in the list, right? So this Safeway is an urban location, so they'll appear when I filter to other urban. And that's where your location types, your zones, and we have a list of cities will help you kind of filter down to a manageable list of what you want to do. I can also filter by device type. So if I just want to say take care of all my package audits and package tests, that'll filter that down for me. If I'm more in the mode to do petroleum inspections, I can filter on that. So that's the main purpose of this screen. The inspections that are listed here are really a combination of 3 different kinds of inspections. We have inspections due. These are your routine initial inspections that are due every year or 2 years or 10 years or what have you. We also have complaint inspections. So one of the other things you'll find under activities is, I don't see it in the menu here. There is a complaint form.
I think there's a permission. I think you have to give yourself.
Okay.
Give your role.
That's true. I did not come and look at my roles. I am an administrator, so let's go to administrator role and add enter complaint. There we go. Thank you, Zach. So under activities now, I should see complaints. Okay, so I can enter a weights and measures complaint, and there is a default time frame within which I'm supposed to do an inspection for that complaint. So on my planner, I may also see inspections that are due as a result of complaints being filed. And then I may also have follow-up inspections. So whenever I do an inspection, if any devices or packages or whatever fail, then I can establish a follow-up due date, which again has a default time frame by device type, generally 30 days. But essentially those, once a device gets placed back in service, you'll need to go out and do a place in service report. We don't exactly know when that re-inspection is going to happen. We don't know when the service agent's going to put it back in service. But we'll put something on your planner 30 days from now to go back to that location, just so you know that that's something that's likely to come up in the next 30 days. Okay, so we have a pretty limited amount of data here. What do I do with this? So I filtered this down to, here are the things that fall into my region, fall into my district, fall into the device types that I'm looking at doing over the next month or two. if I click on any of these rows in the itinerary, you'll see they turn green. Okay, and what that means is I've claimed that inspection. I'm planning on going out and doing this petroleum inspection at this Safeway. So if there's 3 other petroleum inspectors in Imperial County, when they come to their planner, this row is going to be highlighted yellow. Right? Meaning that somebody's already claimed it, so I shouldn't plan on doing that. And I can, click, or I can click on it again and that will unselect it. But having clicked on these and turned them green, that means as far as my planning goes, I'm planning on doing these 2 inspections. And I have a filter at the very top that, these may appear on different pages, they may appear in different filters, but I can show my itinerary and that will just show me all of the inspections that I've selected to flag for me to do. Okay, and there's the capability isn't there yet, but pretty soon you'll see an export to Excel up at the top right, so that you can export these inspection details, location information, inspection type and frequency, what the inspection reason is, how many devices, how far past due is it. And then here, Jay or Joe to answer some of your, actually I'm not sure if it was Jay or Joe that asked the question. The remarks from the prior inspection will be displayed here. So when you go out and do an inspection, if there's something odd going on at the business, or if there was a new device there, or if you didn't get to finish the devices because you ran out of time, or you ran out of your equipment failed or something, those remarks will be available to the next inspector when they're planning to do that next inspection over here on the right.
Yeah, that definitely answers my question. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so envision this when I've got maybe 40 or 50 or 60 inspections lined up for the next couple months. What's a good way for me to look at these? Well, obviously showing them on a map is a good way to look at them. So we have a link up here that says show on map. It's also available here under the map viewer, and that's going to open up a separate window or separate browser tab, and it's going to give me a map of my county with my county boundary, and it has the same filters here as we have on the planner. Okay, so I'm going to kick out my Outlook, and you'll see now that it's highlighted Safeway number 888. And I can zoom in there, and if I click on that Safeway, it'll tell me my next inspection due is December 31st, and that's for audits packages. But there's actually 3 inspections due at this location. So the second one is computing scales, which is due March 31st. And then I have a third one, which is petroleum, which is also due March 31st. Okay, so I can zoom into a given location. It's only going to show 1 dot on the map because all those inspections are due at that same location. But it does color code them. And once you've got sort of a bigger population of data, the color breaks will make more sense. But we have a color for inspections that are due within a week. Well, excuse me, the first one is a red for inspections that are overdue. Then we have a different color for inspections that are due within a week, and then inspections that are due next week, and then inspections that are due by the end of this month, inspections that are due by the end of next month, and then finally inspections that are due more than next month out. And they all get colored purple because obviously those are the least critical ones to get out to. Okay, so I can hide this filters thing so I get a bigger map. This also helps me kind of envision, if I've got dots in various locations, I can plan my routes. If I've got a bunch of, retail motor fuel inspections up here, up the highway, I can, figure out what week I'm going to have the provers with me. And, I think it's just a useful way to look at your inspections coming up due. So now let's actually go do an inspection. Right? So I'm going to go back to my location device types, and go to my Safeway. And here for computing scales, if I look at my inspection history, eventually this will list all of the computing scale inspections that have been done at this Safeway. So it'll have the routine ones, it'll have the place and service inspections, it'll have complaints and there may be other inspection types, so sort of a general category for other, which, might be investigation related or survey related or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and start a new inspection. And I clicked on the button that says start it in a new tab, so I've still got my history here. Now, the anatomy of the inspection forms. There are different details that you'll enter for device inspections, for petroleum, pricing and signage inspections, weighmaster certs, package audits, package tests, price verifications. There are some common features. At the very top, we tell you where you are, what weights measures program you're in, and what specific device type it is or inspection type it is. If it's a device inspection type, it'll tell you how many devices we think they have and when the next inspection is due. This is the next routine inspection. So obviously, if you're doing a place in service, a re-inspection, then this is irrelevant, but it's handy to have up there. Way over to the right, it'll tell you what the most recent routine inspection was, just so you know. So if I'm doing a place in service and someone was out the week before doing the routine initial inspection, I'll know, yeah, that inspection was just done a week before. But we're entering the very first inspection here. So the first thing I'm going to figure out is the date and time. So we're doing the inspection today, and then I have a time picker. To keep the list short, it gives you every half hour, but if I wanted to put in a more precise time, I could edit this and say 11:15 or 11:10. We require a date, but we don't require a time. The time can be useful, for tracking purposes. And some of the inspection certificates do actually put a time in there, so it's good to have. Then we have the overall inspection reason, right? So routine, obviously, that's your annual or whatever your inspection frequency is for that device type. Re-inspections are when devices are being placed back in service. Complaints are responding to complaints, and others a bucket for any other type of inspection. So we're going to do a routine inspection, and you'll see once I pick routine, we get some additional things that pop up here, and these have to do with, okay, you're going to do your routine inspection. How are we going to calculate the next due date for this device type? And I'll come back and talk about that after I talk about some of the other fields here. We have the inspector name, which it picked up from my login, so no need to enter anything there. If it's a complaint inspection, we want to know the number of consumer and other complaints that led to this inspection. If you have devices or packages or whatever that fail, then you're going to want to schedule a follow-up inspection. And when you click yes, you can enter the follow-up date. We have a little bit of work going on right now to automatically populate this based on a configuration for the device type. I think it's pretty universal that your place and service calls are due within 30 days. So we can default it to that, but it's up to the inspector and their discretion as to when they want to set that follow-up date. Again, there's nothing important about this follow-up date, except that's when it will appear on your planner to just be aware, hey, you're probably going to get a place in service before this date. And then over to the right is some things to do with violations. So obviously, if you have devices failing inspection, you're going to want to record how many violations, or if it's a repaired device, how many service agent violations there were. And then a couple of other things that we report for the county monthly or annual reports is was a no percent and what was the fine severity listed. And then the last thing we have here is miles. It's good to track miles on all of your inspections, but it's important if you're doing, for example, a re-inspection. Most of the time, your re-inspections are sort of covered by your device registration fee. But if a device fails a certain number of times, you have the option of charging the business for that re-inspection. So as the inspector, you can flag this re-inspection fee, saying, yeah, we're going to bill you for this re-inspection. And then it's really important to have these miles because they're part of the re-inspection invoice generator. We'll bill those miles at the standard mileage rate. So let's go back to this being a routine inspection.
If we leave that blank, sorry to interrupt. If we leave that blank because we don't bill for miles on re-inspection, does it upset the re-inspection bill generator?
Nope, just in your invoice configuration, you just set the reinspection mileage fee to 0.
Thanks.
Okay, so as far as the calculating the next due date, right? So when we came into this, it was telling us that the next inspection due for these computing scales is March 31st, 2021. Obviously, we're ahead of schedule. We're doing it in November. The system by default is going to take the inspection interval default for these devices, which is 1 year, and it's going to add that to this next inspection due. And I don't really have any good basis for doing it that way, except that's the way we did it in Santa Clara County. So I haven't really talked to DMS about it. So I'm interested in your feedback about that. If my preference, or if our county's preference is, that's not going to be calculated from this next inspection due, it should be calculated from the actual inspection date, I can just very easily override this. I could say, no, we're going to make this November 10, 2022.
Just quickly, our practice is that we kind of consider it all fluid throughout the year. So we say it has to be sealed in the year 2020, and we have 12 months to decide when we want to do it. So and we do kind of jump around. So some years we, our LPG prover was broken for a long time, and so like we didn't do any of those inspections until we got it fixed. So there's changes into why we would want to do something during a certain month, and it always depends on staff and weather and whatever.
Okay, so this could work well for you. You could, for the most part, these will say December 31, and whatever time during 2021 you do this inspection, it's going to kick it out to December 31, 2022.
Fair enough.
It does raise an interesting point, which might be an enhancement that we make to the planner, right? So if we think about, let's go back to our planner. I'll just open that up in a separate tab so I don't lose my place here. On the planner, if all of our inspections are due December 31, it means that this Outlook function isn't all that useful, because there's really not going to be any differentiation based on date here. So one thing we might consider is, in addition to the inspection due, we could go by device type and add a field that says what month or what quarter of the year do you typically do these devices. So think about that a little bit, as to how we can make the timing more useful for you, where most of your actual inspection due dates are going to be the end of the year. But it's kind of important that if you want to schedule all of a particular device type during a certain time of the year, the planner won't reflect that right now, but we can probably make it reflect that for you.
Yeah, and I would say that that's generally how we do it, but not always. Like, we do some things regionally, like, oh, we're going to Salton City, which is way out of the way, so we're going to try and do everything in Salton City if possible, but that's not always the case either. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Going to Salt City, take all the equipment and plan on having a lot of date shakes. Okay, so back to our inspection. So the next inspection due date really, like I said, is only going to be calculated when dealing with routine inspections. And that's all the header information. So that's common to every inspection type. You're going to have that header information. I'll come back to this middle section because this varies based on the inspection type. But then all inspections have these two last parts. There's the remarks field, and this is where you can enter general information that doesn't fit in the form anywhere else about the inspection, about the business. And these remarks, if you're doing a routine inspection, these remarks are going to show up for the next inspector when they're getting ready to schedule the next inspection for this. So, that's just a useful thing to keep in mind, that you can put some good information in there for the next inspector. And then down at the bottom, we want to get a little more specific about the violations when you have devices that fail, or other inspections that record rejections or failures. And so we have a way to add specific violations to your inspection. And it's a little form that pops up. You've got a place to enter a business practice code section, a California Code of Regs section, And then also a county ordinance if you have specific, if you have a scanner ordinance or other local county ordinances that you want to reference here. And then a remarks section. Now, we're tracking this information. We have a place for you to enter it. We have not yet begun the discussions on can we do something a little bit like CalCATS in terms of translating this stuff into violation notices and doing a little bit more on the enforcement tracking side. But at least we have the basics. With the BNP code, we have got a copy of all the BNP code sections that relate to weights and measures. It may be a little out of date, so we're going to have to review it and make sure we've got all the updated code sections in here. But if I start entering a search term, I'll actually get a drop-down list of BP code sections. Okay, so here they cheated and added something to increase the weight, extra heavy plastic bags. We do not have a database of the CCR code sections for weights and measures, or obviously for your county ordinances. To get the CCR code sections, there's going to be a copyright issue because the company that has the database of these doesn't let anyone have it electronically. So we're going to have to, hopefully depend on someone at DMS to get us a copy of that somehow. So for right now, if you're going to do a CCR reference, you would do it sort of like freeform, free CCR, I don't know, 1201. And that might be, something like that. And the same goes for county ordinances. We don't have everyone's county ordinances right now. So, you might have Imperial County 1233, so far, so on. If you want, though, if you can get us a copy of your county ordinance sections and the titles that pertain to weights and measures, we can load it up into the database for you. And then instead of seeing this free-form text box, you'll see this type of search box instead. Okay, so those are the common features in inspections. You've got the definition area, you've got the remarks area, you've got the violations area. Now, our actual inspection results.
Can you show me that?
Devices,
I'm sorry to interrupt again. Can you show me that enter individual devices button? What's that do?
Yep. I can't do anything useful with it just yet. We'll click on it. We're just going to get sort of an empty list here. So let me just take a step back and I'll explain it and I'll show you how to make it work in a more useful way. So when I do device inspections, I can either just enter the total number that passed, failed over, failed under, or failed other. Or I can enter pass, fail over, fail under, fail other for each individual device in this list of 5 devices. Now, I got to take a step back and go back to our Safeway and go back to our scales here. We entered that they have 5 devices, but I didn't click on this button here, which is the device list. Okay, so in order to make it more useful to track individual devices, it's best to set up those devices at the location device type screen. Okay, so I know they've got 5 scales. I'm going to click on here and say, give me 5 empty scale rows. And then I can fill out, what these are. So this might be deli counter right end, and this might be left end, and they might have one over in dry goods, and so on. I can also enter the manufacturer model and serial number for each of them. And then obviously, as devices, we don't want to lose the device history once we've created a device. So if they get rid of this scale, rather than deleting it, it's best if I just deactivate it, and it won't show up on inspections in the future.
That's great. I like this functionality. Can I make a suggestion that you add maybe a checkbox or something about the type approval, that it is type approved, yes or no, like that we've actually checked that?
Yep, very good suggestion. I hadn't thought about type approval. Yep. Yep, we'll definitely add that. This can be a bit of a painful process, particularly when you're dealing with, like a mobile home park that might have 50 submeters. And those are typically the kinds of devices you really want to keep track of by serial number. So we have a export and import function here. This export will just give you a Excel file. And you can, instead of typing everything in on the web browser, you can use this Excel file to enter your, information here. So if you have a sequence of serial numbers, you can use Excel's fill functionality and increment and so on to get all that information. And then once that spreadsheet is complete, you can just re-upload it here with the import button. It'll fill out this grid for you. Okay, so let's go back to our inspection, and I'm just going to refresh the screen. So let's go back to 11:30. We're doing a routine inspection. All this looks good. Now when I click on enter individual devices, you'll see I get my 5 devices that I'd set up for that location. Now, all that said, if you run into another device while you're out there, you can certainly add them during the inspection. And one of the reports that we'll be working on, Jay or Joe, you asked about it, is a device variance report that will tell you when your inspections are coming back showing either more or less devices at a location than what you billed them for during the device registration process. So that you can do, I don't know if you do, mid-year billings for additional devices, but it certainly supports doing all of that type of thing.
Does when you update this list, does it update the list under the location?
Yep.
Cool.
I think so. Zach, you may have to correct me, or we may need to make a note to make it do that. But the intention is, yeah, once an inspector adds a new device during an inspection, that device should show up under that location as a device on their list.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think removing it from this grid actually has the effect of deactivating it on the location. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so as far as entering results here.
Was there another question there?
Sorry, I just want to talk a little bit more about that, what you were talking about just now about the device tracking module that you're working on building. That's it. I can't stress how often it was a nuisance to try and figure out, like, okay, why did you only inspect 40 scales? There's 42. What happened to the other 2? Which 2 didn't you inspect? Why didn't you inspect them? And there's so many, like an infinite number of reasons. So yeah, like I definitely want to see more if you have more on that subject.
Okay, I don't have any more on that subject other than once you have the devices identified, if for some reason I don't inspect device number 5, I will simply leave this inspection type blank. So let me do that. Let me do an inspection, right? One thing I just want to point out is even though I'm doing a routine inspection, that does not mean that all of my devices are going to be a routine or initial inspection. Okay, so most of them will be. So let's see, I'm going to do initial and it passed. This one was initial and it passed. But it could be that, during the last routine inspection, this dry goods scale was not in service. And so this might be a repair by company or repair by owner inspection. So just keep that in mind that each device, you can specify the inspection type for that device in this grid. If you're just entering summary information, you can do the same thing here, whether it's initial, new install, reinspection, or other. So I'll enter all of these as initials.
Yep, and while you're doing that, I'll note too that it's an either or. So you either are entering individual devices or you're entering counts. It doesn't let you change those counts up there when you're in this device entry mode.
Yep. Okay, so I've inspected 5 devices. I skipped device number 5 for some reason. and I've got 4 passed and 1 failed over, and that's summarized up here in this block, which, you know, right now this is not editable because this is just a summary of what I've entered down here. So this would be a case where if I were going to complete this inspection report as is, I'd want to go down to my remarks and say, you know, could not county scale number 5 was broken, or I ran out of time, or, you know, whatever the reason is. So let's continue with that. Now I will show you, obviously, we want to know that during this routine inspection, there were 6 devices, and I only inspected 5 of them. And I'll show you where that information gets updated.
Is there a spot for red tags, like number of red tags issued? And then I think red tags have numbers, maybe like a serialized number. Does that sound right?
I haven't heard that. So any device that fails for any reason is going to be red tagged, right?
No, not necessarily. If it's benefiting the customer, we won't necessarily red tag it.
Okay, but there's not another. I've also heard there's another tag color, right?
The
Yellow.
blue tag. Oh.
Well, yellow is for type approval.
Okay, so it might be useful to add into these results if a tag is affixed to the device, what the tag number and tag color is. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it would be nice to have that functionality. Like I red tag device number 4, and I think our red tags might be serialized. Maybe that's where I'm getting this number, is that, like, I think that we had them printed with like a 4-digit serial number on them, but I don't know that would be uniform across counties.
Well, if we create a place to enter it, you know, and make it optional, people can enter it, and if they don't have it, they can leave it blank.
Well, I'd be interested to also know, is at least as I understand it, the over column here would be any, you know, any red tag that you know, is definitely an out scale that isn't kind of the under that might be benefiting the customer. Is that cover what you're talking about, or is there something more specific with that?
I'm a little rusty on weights and measures, so I'm trying to think of a scenario where that wouldn't be sufficient, and I'm not sure. And I think Jay has gotten off of the line. I don't see him anymore on the participant list. So
yep.
Yeah.
To leave. Can you repeat the question? I think Nick might be able to answer.
Sure. Just as I understand it, the column in here that really matters is the over column, and under, at least in other counties, I've also heard those being blue tagged, as you know, they're benefiting the customer, and if they want to, they can kind of you know, indicate that, but that it doesn't necessarily pull the device from service.
Yeah, that sounds all correct.
Okay.
Cool. So I still like the idea of tracking a place or adding a place to track a tag number. Mm-hmm. But we can, you know, have that discussion with everyone that we're talking to right now, that an over failure is automatically assumed to be a red tag. An under or an other failure is automatically assumed to be to the benefit of the customer, and they may or may not blue tag that device. But in any case, you know, add another column here would be a tag number that is optional, that can be tracked.
Excuse me, Nick, can you remind me, if a device is like grossly out of order, like if it's under registering by like a certain percentage, I think we're also supposed to red tag those devices. Does that sound right?
It's really, it's at our discretion. The code does not specify that, you know, you can leave something in service or whatever. we just kind of do that because it makes sense to allow a business to rip itself off if it wants to. But technically, they are required by law to repair it. Yeah.
I want to say there was a gas pump once that was like wildly under registering and then wildly over registering, where like it was just like it couldn't be relied upon to go one way or the other because it was so out of order, you know. So I think there might be some conditions where we would red tag and under register.
Okay.
I think
yeah.
So
As long as the option is there, that's, you know, that should be fine.
yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that the you know, these under, over, under, and other, these are all these columns all drive the county monthly report, and so we're, you know, at least the expectation would be that if you're putting it in there, then that would fit the you know, the guidance from DMS for those columns. But to John's point, if there's additional information that might be really useful to track for those, then we can continue to talk about that, I'm sure.
yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it sounds like to have the, you know, you could indicate whether it was over or under separately from having a device red tagged or yellow tagged, because I think those are tracked in the monthly report at somewhere in there as well. So if you put in like the red tag serial number, then you know, when you're generating the report, it will base the red tag numbers based on how many of those fields have been, you know, filled or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards having two columns added here. One being you know, what type of tag was affixed, and the other being if the tag is numbered, what was the tag number? Having the tag number will be useful when you come back to do a re-inspection, just to make sure that you're, you know, inspecting the device that the place and service report was for. And then having the tag issue information will also be useful for reporting later to kind of see, you know, what percentage of the time was an over result red tagged, what percentage of the time was an under result red tagged.
It sounds great.
I think so.
Yep, so that's a really good observation. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and try and save this inspection. And it's gonna yell at me and say, okay, you need to set a follow-up if you have a failed item. So I have a scale that failed over. So I presumably red tagged device number 6. So the system wants me to set a follow-up and create a follow-up date for it. So I'll go ahead and comply and do that. We're gonna set this for 12/10/2020. And then it also says, if you have a failed item, you have to have a violation count. So I got to put something in violations or service agent violations. You know, this was an initial inspection, so it's not a re-inspection, so it's not going to be a service agent violation. But I can put 0, right? So if I put in 0 here, I can be good to go. If I put in 1 here, then it's not, we don't enforce it, but the expectation would be I'm going to put in 1 row in my violations listing to say what code section was violated.
Would it be inconvenient for you guys to make that follow-up date? Like, I just want to automate it to 30 days. You know what I mean? Like, can it be like a, yep, follow-up 30 days? Because that's how we normally do it. Sometimes it's 10, but.
It actually should be. So no, it will not be inconvenient for us. Once you click on need follow-up, each device type has a default follow-up number of days specified for it. So this date should be populating based on that number. It just isn't right now.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's go back to our device history screen. So now we'll see in our device history, we have our routine inspection device. You'll see that our next inspection due has been updated to the inspection due that we set on this inspection. If I go all the way back to our, close some of these extra tabs, back to our Safeway location, you'll see that the device list here, let's just go check that. The device list got updated. Zach can just make a note that we didn't update the number of devices here. So this should have been updated to 6. And this would tell me that my last routine inspection only got 5 of them. So there's an uninspected device, which was something that Jay was looking for as some way to tell when you've got locations that have had their routine inspection done, but not all the devices were inspected for one reason or another. Okay, and then I want to go back into that inspection history and look at one other thing that we didn't look at, which is our device inspection certificate. So under the export button here, we have two ways to export our inspection sort of receipt, if you like. We can either do it as an Excel form, or we can do it just as a straight PDF. So let's take a look at the PDF that we've developed. We have not developed a certificate of inspection like this for every inspection type. Some of them are really complex, and most counties say they don't really use them, the DMS forms. So be interested to get your feedback on that. But for the main ones, the device inspections, price verification, I forget the list. Zach, what are the other ones that we did the certificates for?
So petroleum, shoot, I'm at a loss, but it is the more common ones.
I think your weighmaster inspection, petroleum device, quality or quantity control.
Yeah, so yeah, price verification, which is definitely a big one in some counties, and and I want to say the weighmaster one is in there as well. Yeah, those four.
I think we did do the weighmaster certs. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so this would be something that can be printed off and signed. We don't and aren't planning at this time to have a mobile app for the weights and measures inspections this year, but we are planning to bring one out next year, which would mean that you can run this on an iPad and collect the signature and do the same thing you do with your inspection forms and CalCATS, which I think will make this whole process a lot more convenient.
Yep, and it's worth noting too, if you had done more than one device inspection on the same day, they would all come into the same form. So I'm sure that's pretty common, right? Where you've got a few different kinds of scales or at the same location, and those would all go in the same form here.
Okay, so we've been going 2 hours, and I think we should probably plan on wrapping up for today.
I just have one more. Sorry to interrupt one more time. We track hours based on inspection type, like device type. So does this have a functionality for that? So like okay, so you have it there. All right. So like for if we did 6 different types, we would put a half an hour for each, and it would sum for us.
Yep. So each one of these, even though we've entered the results down here and they're summarized here, these hours fields are still need to be filled out, and so you can enter your hours by the different inspection types.
Well, I meant device type. So if we did multiple devices, like counter scales and computing scales and hanging scales, all in the same location, that the hours would tally separately.
They do, yep. So each different device type is going to go onto a separate inspection form.
Got it.
And that's what Zach was saying. So if I do computing scales, counter scales, and something else at this Safeway, hanging scales at this Safeway on the same day, when I generate this PDF, rather than generating it separately for each one of those inspections, I'll just generate it once, and it will list in this section, it will list all the different device types and everything that I've done on that day for that location.